Everyone can kindly grab a seat. We have lunch being set up right now. What I suggest that we do, we try to start these meetings at 12:10 and end them by 2 o'clock so that everybody can go back to service in corporate America. With Gigi's allowance and Shelly and Mo, once the food is set up, the event is already going to begin. If you're very hungry, quietly get up, grab a plate, grab a sandwich, grab a soda, and come back to your seat. At 1:30, we're going to break off for Q&A, and at that time, if anybody can hold off until then, that would probably make most sense. Very, very exciting day. We are combining 3 groups of friends together to one very, very important event for me personally and for these 3 groups. We have here the Forum of Israeli High-Tech Executives, FISH, which is run by Moti Ben Yona, head of high-tech at Shibolet, and Guy Franklin of Ernst & Young. Guy is over here. Guy has put together the Israeli high-tech map, bringing all of us together, not only in real life, but also in the virtual world. Moti and Guy are servicing a lot of the executives from FISH that are here in the room. We also have the group, the Forum of Israeli CEOs, that gets together once a month. Most of our events are in Hebrew, but when we have an opportunity to have an event in English, we expand the list also to English-speaking friends of Israel. And we have a big group of CEOs here from that group. And we also have a random group of good friends of Shelly and Moore, of Gigi, and myself, who are here in the room. It was supposed to take place in our conference room. Those of you who were in our conference room understand why we had to shift this from 34th and 8th to 53rd and Park. And I hope that that worked for everyone. It looks like from the capacity in the room that it worked pretty well. The Forum of Israeli High-Tech Executives and the Forum of Israeli CEOs, these are 2 groups that have been meeting once a month for 9 years. We've had people speak about the general topic called Startup Nation from various angles, from various aspects. We had Dan Senor, who coined the term and wrote the book, speak. We had Shimon Peres, who is considered the father of Israeli creativity and the person who pushed Israel towards technology 30 or 40 years ago. We've had other people like Yossi Vardi, like Ariel Margarit from JVP, people who are industry leaders in this weird bubble of Israeli technology, Israeli creativity, this enormous boost to Israeli economy in the last 20 years come and speak before us. But I think that you will all join me in being very excited about having somebody who covers many aspects of the Startup Nation that we have yet to meet and hear about. Gigi Levy is in his early 40s, and he's already established himself as a super angel in Israel, as a mega entrepreneur. He's founded, been on the board on, shared CEO'd over 10 of Israel's most important technology companies. At the age of 35, he was CEO of 888, which was a public company, which still is a public company in the gaming industry, with an MBA from Kellogg, and with a lot of social involvement, something that we also talk about in some of our meetings. Gigi is involved in Latet, in meat. I think we had Asaf Halap speak about meat 3 or 4 years ago. This is a great opportunity for us to have Gigi here. After Gigi is going to give his presentation, we're also going to have Shelly and Mo, 2 close friends who have been with us in the Israeli community in New York for many years. Shelly was part of Goldman Sachs and moved to Israel with Goldman Sachs, and Moore did her MBA in Columbia. I worked in IBM, and both of them actually met in our forum in Israel, decided to leave corporate America and start iAngels, a very, very exciting platform, which I think brings all of the startup nation together, giving us in the U.S. the ability to access real-time what's going on in Israel in this industry. And despite not wanting to do 6 months of due diligence or spend $1 million on an investment, through iAngels, through Shelley and Moore, now we have an opportunity to really track, to really follow people like Gigi Levy and his investments in Israel. So after Gigi speaks, Shelley and Moore will talk a little bit about their platform, and at the end of that, I hope we'll have enough time to open the floor for questions, at which time also lunch will be served. I would also like to thank Avenue for hosting us here, and I would also like to ask Gigi for not canceling the event despite the fact that he's sick and he's hoarse.
Yeah, that's why it's going to be very funny.
Anyway, thank you, Gigi.
Thanks. So hi guys, can you hear me back there? This is not hi everybody. This is not my normal voice, although some people say it suits me. And yesterday I woke up and I figured out that I don't have a voice, so I wrote Shelley and I said, make sure there are big speakers. She didn't take it lightly, but I hope it's okay. I didn't speak for like 24 hours. On the flight I like just used hand signals. Now it all seems to be okay, or more or less okay. This is a very diverse forum. Some people here are experts in the high-tech industry, more than I am, or been around a lot more than I have been, a lot longer, and others are new to it or less experienced. So basically what I prepared is a presentation that I call Investing in the Accelerated World, which is supposed to help you understand how I look at investments. I'm not going to tell you about myself, thanks for the nice words, but what I want to share with you is about how I look at the world. And how I look at the world basically impacts how I invest. So we're going to talk about some context, the world we live in, the impact on companies, why is innovation so tough? And at the end of the day, how can you overcome difficulties? And then therefore, how can you basically decide where to put your money, where to invest? So this is one of my favorite quotes from a French poet, and he said that the trouble with our times is that the future is not what it used to be. And while this sounds very banal, at the end of the day, this is actually something that many companies seem to be having and feeling right now, and that is that the future, or what they're experiencing now, is not the way they looked at their businesses in the past. So let's look at the world we live in for a second. We're looking at a world where the pace of change is changing. So it's not just that the change is very fast. We're looking at a world where if we take every 10 years of our life and we compare them to 10 years in the lives of our parents, and they compare them to 10 years in the life of their parents, you see that in each 10-year the pace of change, the quantity of change that we're seeing, especially on the technology side, is growing and accelerating. We have a lot more info. And the fact that we have a lot more info means that we have a lot more choice. It also means that the fact that we have a lot more choice means that there's no such thing as brokerage anymore, and many ecosystems are just falling apart. So I used to have a friend that many years ago used to fly to Africa. He used to buy one of these for $50 and used to get to Africa and sit down with the minister and tell him, this costs you, and only because it's you, $272,000, which is a great price. And he usually would take the price 5% down and would sell it. He tells me that when he goes there today, he comes and says, this costs you whatever he says, and the guy turns around the PC and he shows him directly from the manufacturer in China that he can buy it for half the price that he buys it, and eventually he ends up buying from them. If we think about brokerage in industries such as music, think about what happened when we were kids. When we were kids, if I wanted to listen to an artist out of Canada, the route that this went was the same thing. The Canadian singer had an agent in Canada who worked with a label in Canada who, assuming he was good, they went to one of the big labels in the United States, who then took it to their subsidiary in Europe, who then got in touch with the label in Israel, We then got a local distributor and local company to manufacture the CDs, and then they distributed to shops where I could then actually go and listen to it. Today, the same artist puts it on iTunes, and 5 minutes later, I can download it. Apple takes their cut, but their cut is tiny compared to the cut of this entire ecosystem. Larry Page likes saying that the people that lost the most along the way are lawyers, because in all of that ecosystem, there's many lawyers along the way, but it's not just lawyers, it's actually lots of business people on the way that used to have a job and today don't, so there's a lot of change. We talk about a very flat world, and the flat world, this term that talks about a world where technology enables you to consume services from the other side of the world, where your road support is basically done from Pune in India. But this flat world is actually happening. And when companies like Waze can actually sit in Israel and be the preferred navigation supplier for people sitting the other side of the world, this is truly a flat world. And things move very fast and are very viral. And this virality thing is something we're going to talk about later. And that means that the speed in which things change is pretty extreme. So let's for a second take 5 minutes and talk about what's accelerating our world. So the first thing that's accelerating our world is internet, of course. So this is the first time ever that in the Western world, more than half the people have access to broadband. And clearly, when we talk about internet, it's broadband that makes the difference, because with narrowband, you just can't consume the internet properly. In 2013 is the first time ever when actually half the Western world is going to have mobile broadband, with more than 50% today, which means that all of us hold in our hands this small device which is connected to more knowledge than anybody in the human history ever had. And of course, these devices themselves, they're the most sophisticated pieces of technology that we ever had, the humankind ever had. Each smartphone basically has the computing power that only 15 years ago needed a room as big as this room. And the ability to basically hold these devices, which are convergent internet communication, entertainment devices, have them with us everywhere and access the internet, clearly is accelerating the world. On top of it, we spoke about this virality thing, and this comes from the fact that the world is social. So when we talk about social, this is basically a few slides about, a few graphs about that. So these are the top sites in the world. We can say that the majority of them are social or user-generated content. It's pretty clear. This is the very quick rise of Facebook, bypassing basically all other sites in the world in a very short period. But the interesting ones are both of these. This is referral traffic to top services in the United States. And you can see in the referral traffic that almost every service gets more traffic from social networks than it does from Google. And if the social network is what we would call subjective, assuming, of course, that Google is objective, that's a whole different discussion. Assuming for a second that Google is objective, we can see that basically subjective overtook objective. And the scariest one of them is this one, where you can see that when you talk about news referrals, you can see that 5% of news reading in the United States comes from social referrals versus only 1.5% from search. Again, not that Google is very objective at the end of the day, but it's clear that for all of us today, it is a lot easier to follow others and to follow social signals than it is to follow anything which is objective. So the next thing is the fact that technology enables segmentation and personalization. And the fact that it enables segmentation and personalization means that things can move a lot faster because every person gets exactly what they want. This is perhaps the most favorite quote of all time for me. This is Jeff Bezos in 1998, if I recall correctly. He said, we have 6.2 million customers, and therefore we should have 6.2 different stores for them. And if you know Amazon well, you know that Amazon a few years ago stopped talking about a segmentation of one. They're talking now about a segmentation of 1/10. What does that mean? It means that in the past they used to say Gigi's store is very different than Oren's store or anybody else's. And that was very clear, and we all know that. But what they're talking about today is something completely different. They're talking about Gigi's store being different depending on Gigi's context. So if I come in the morning, my Amazon recommendation would be different than the Amazon recommendation would be if I come in the evening. If I'm right now shopping for a book, then my recommendation would be around that topic. Or if I'm coming from a work computer, I'll get different recommendations than if I'm coming from home computer or from a mobile. And so this 1/10 segmentation means that they can cater for me, something which is really not just for me, but for me in the right context. And what if you don't feel that that is true, I recommend that you try going and shopping in Amazon from somebody else's computer. Even take your spouse's computer and try looking at Amazon the way it looks from their account. And I can tell you that in my case, it's a scary thing. It's not very trivial. All my geeky stuff disappeared. And there's a lot of kid stuff coming up and some other things. But it's a very personalized approach, which makes things move a lot faster. And then, of course, there's the long tail. And I'm sorry for those of you who are very familiar with this, but it just helps explain what's happening in the internet. And this is a typical consumption graph, where this is the units sold of something, and this is the number of products sold. And if we take books, then there's clearly only one Harry Potter or Hunger Games or whatever that sells a gazillion units for every book. Then there's the John Grishams of the world, they sell a lot as well. But then there's a Dutch poetry book that sells really little in terms of quantity. And clearly for years in the offline world, the only thing you held was this. You held around 10,000 books, which was limited by your shelf space. If you're a physical retailer, you need to choose. So you only stock the things that bring you the most money. But if you're Amazon, then you can have 5 million books because you don't really have the books. You have them in central storage, and basically 80% of them are just back ordered when one of us buys them. And the interesting research about it is that the first thing that I think people already understood in the year 2000 was that mathematically, the revenues here are pretty equal to the revenues here. Now clearly this is 5 million, this goes all the way to the other side of the city, and clearly this, many units selling very little, equals in revenues this one, and that's already been proven years ago, but that's not really interesting. The interesting things are the two other elements, and the first one, of course, is customer loyalty. And what do you think is going to make me more loyal? This book that I can buy everywhere, or this book that if I live somewhere in Missouri, my only chance in the world of getting is buying it online in Amazon. So clearly, I'm going to be a lot more loyal customer based on that. But what's even more interesting is margins, because these books that are sold also in Walmart and everywhere else, they're very pressed on margin. You can't make a lot of margin on them. And if you look at the price they're being sold, they're usually sold below the recommended retail price. If you look at these books, not only that they're sold at the recommended retail price or more, but they also don't get free shipment, they don't get free anything. If you want to buy them, you need to pay your money for them. And so the margin on this is actually much higher than the margin on the hits. And then the next thing, which some people find surprising, but I think it's relevant, is the fact that the games are everywhere. And the reason why it's important is because, sorry, my voice makes me laugh. The reason why it's important is because games are basically accessible by everybody. And the fact that they're accessible by everybody allows them to move much quicker than almost anything else. So if we look at games, everything today is a game. And this is the point where I ask people who played everything, and nobody played anything. Everybody just has a friend that played something. That one is World of Warcraft. Who plays World of Warcraft here? Come on. Bunch of geeks and nobody plays World of Warcraft? Okay. Anybody knows how many subscribers these guys have? They have close to 17 million subscribers that pay $20 a month. Math quickly in your mind. Okay, that is a lot of money. Okay, that's more than $1.5 billion profit a year out of one game. This one, Guitar Hero. Okay, more than 100 million plastic guitars sold. Very brilliant idea. If you want to study how to play music, don't take guitar classes. Press on plastic guitars and the music comes out, that's great. And more than 1 billion songs sold. This one, Mafia Wars, that was saying this biggest hit at a certain point. When I was 13 or 14 years old, I used to code games that were much higher quality than that. But this one still made $100 million revenues a year at a certain point. That's a true social game. You recruit your friends to be part of your mafia gang. You send them to recruit others or take money from others. And that was a big hit. And of course, that one, Farmville, that at the peak made $250 million a year with hundreds of millions of active players. And this is one game in the world that you'll never find anybody that admitted to ever pay anything. So if you ask people, nobody ever paid anything, and still they made $250 million a year. But these are actually the past, because the current present games are these two babies. This one is called Candy Crush. I assume all of you know somebody that played it. And Candy Crush makes, I'm not sure who of you knows, but this company makes around $5 million a day in revenues. Wow. Let me repeat this figure, $5 million a day. This one is slightly more, this is, you know what's the average demographics? Everybody thinks kids. The average demographics are women, 35 to 45. Okay, that's 80% of the money. This one, on the other hand, is called Clash of Clans. This is mostly men, 25 to 35. And this is what's called it's a real-time strategy game. You basically build things and fight with others. Without insulting anybody that plays this game, it's basically a glorified version of Farmville. Okay, you just think that you're doing something a lot more sophisticated. It's a glorified version of Farmville, but it works. And this game makes only $2.9 million a day. Okay, so games are everywhere, and in more than one way, because they start touching real life. So this is the Nintendo Wii that you all know. This is the Kinect. These are platforms basically that start connecting real life into games. And when you look at it, this is called Wii Fit. And there are more than 150 million people in the world that are training with this thing. That means that instead of, in this case, you see a hula hoop, instead of actually buying a hula hoop that you can put, and well, I can't, but you can put and turn, what you're doing is that you're buying this that costs 150 bucks. You're standing on it, and you're turning a virtual hula hoop, and you watch the screen to see how your hula hoop is turning. Okay, so games are starting to touch real life in more than one way. This is basically the first place where games start actually going into real life, and this is what's called a paywall. A paywall is when you don't want to pay for a game, but the developer still wants you to pay. So what they do, they offer things for you to do, and these things eventually translate into money that you're paying. So in this particular case, if you're willing to take a call from an auto insurance salesperson, which is clearly a very painful experience, you're going to get 506 puppy points in the game. Okay, this basically went to the next step already in the world. The most famous one is in Turkey, where one of the big operators today is offering a service where you can basically get free calls as long as you hear half a minute of advertising when you're dialing before you actually get the call to dial. So this combination between a game-ish experience and real life stuff is becoming very, very evident. And so, and on top of it, the borders between what's real and what's virtual are blurring. And this is making things, guys, by the way, there's chairs here if you want to sit. And so the lines between what's real and what's virtual are actually blurring even more. And it's not by mistake that in today's world, it's reality TV, which is catching everybody's attention when it comes to television. It's not by mistake that in a survey from a few years ago, 43% of young online networkers from the United States said that they feel as strong about people that they got to know online as they do to their real-life friends, which is clearly kind of scary. But this is true, and I went back and I read the original survey to see that they actually mean people that they never met physically. And yes, that's what they ask. It's not by mistake. I mean, Second Life is not that popular, but still making around $150 million a year. And this is a quote from the mythological CEO of Second Life. He said, working in Second Life is like working in London and sending money to your spouse. So working in a virtual world and blurring the lines is something that's happening more and more. And any of you knows what's the biggest business on Second Life, by the way? It's got an Israeli nexus to it.
Real estate?
No.
Weapons?
No, not that kind of Israeli nexus. No, it's actually a brothel. And the Israeli angle is that it's run by a 25-year-old Israeli that's making more than $500,000 a month. If you ask me what you pay for, I have no idea. But that is the Israeli friend. Yeah, exactly. A friend that knows. And reality and the real world are blur even more when you look at things like Foursquare, which is basically a game-ish layer that people play, checking in and trying to become the mayor of something. But then you put a business on top of it, and that becomes a great targeting tool and a great loyalty building tool for people to basically help shop owners or bar owners and restaurant owners to basically create more loyalty to their team. And it's not by mistake that this is the first time ever that a non-real character was on the cover of Playboy. Inside it's a lot worse than that. And so the reality and the virtual world are blurring. Now there's one thing in all my research that I've done that is, I think is important, is the next slide that I want to show you, because this is basically the essence of what I call this accelerated world. What you see here is the rate of adoption of a technology. This is the graph of how many units are sold, and that's here up to 100 million units. And this is years of how long it took for things to be adopted. And you can see that cars took around 100 years to reach 100 million units. And you can see that radio took around 70 years, and you can guess where this is going. And television took around 40 years, and the internet took around 10 years. And iPods took somewhere around 3.5 years. And clearly, in this stage, smart people think, well, of course it moves quicker, because without cars, you couldn't build radio towers, and without radio, people wouldn't be off the television and so on. But still, this is life. And I want you to think about the business impact of this, because, and here I'm slightly tweaking history, but it's not very harmful. But if we think of a company called General Motors that dealt with motors for trains, and let's think that they look at this Model T and Henry Ford, and they think, we want to get into cars. We know wheels, we know engines, we want to get into cars. And they wait first year and they sit at their board and they say, well, maybe not, maybe we'll wait. And they wait another year and another and another, then they wait 20 years. But when they wait 20 years, all they lose is around 4% of the market. That's what they lose at that point. But if you're a small company called Sony that basically dominated the mobile music players field with 72% market share. Remember Walkman and Discman? Who wanted anything else? And you decide that you want to be a bit slow on that. And you decide that you're going to take the same strategy of wait and see. And you wait only 3 years, because that's what they wait on. Then by the time you have a product out, you lose 80% of the market. And anybody knows what Sony's market share today in mobile music players? Less than 1%. So the same thing that was okay as a strategy in the past is completely irrelevant today. And that's what's killing companies. And if we look, it's going to get only worse, because if internet took 10 years, and iPods took, 3.5 or 4, then Facebook took 3 years. And Farmville on it took around 9 months. And clearly Farmville is not cars, but still, this is the word we're looking at. And Cityville, which was the fastest spreading game in history, took 91 days to reach 100 million. I don't think there was ever anything in humankind that spread so fast. And that means that we all need to think about business differently. And it means that companies that used to act in one way need to start thinking how they're going to act from here onwards. So theoretically, it's a perfect world. It's a world for innovation. Internet is everywhere with converged devices, with the social world, with segmentation, personalization, games all around, virtual world, and everything is accelerated. And that seems like a great world for innovation. But that's actually a very, very, very tough world for companies. And in my history, I used to work in small companies, some of them my own, and big companies. I mean, the biggest one I work for is not huge, it's Amdocs. But I ran a division in Amdocs, and at least for Israel, that's pretty big. And I used to, and then I was an investor. And it was very clear that for these big companies, this new world is basically killing them. It's becoming so difficult to succeed. And I started thinking, why is that? Why is it so difficult to innovate? What's the meaning? And so there's a few things that are happening. The first thing is disruptive technologies. Never in history was the pace of new technologies as fast as today. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. There's something that comes out that's going to be newer, better, faster, and that's really killing companies. On top of it, consumers have lost their mind. And consumers are us, of course. And they're becoming very frantic. Now, why are they frantic? They're frantic because they have all the information, and because switching things from one to another has become so easy. So in iAngels, we used to do surveys for our customers. We used to ask telecom customers, how many bad experiences would you need to move from one operator to another? And it was around 2005. The answer was 3 bad experiences. And when we compared this to CRM data, that was actually the case. You could see 1 bad call, another bad call, third one, the customer is gone. Last time I've seen the data, which was in 2007, I think, it was 1. Customers said and actually behaved, if you're going to treat me badly once, I'm going to go. And they're crazy. Why are they crazy? Because today, they don't need to think, is there an alternative? They log in, they browse. 2 seconds, they say exactly what's the alternative. In 2 more seconds, they get pitched with somebody else's offer. So customer behavior is very frantic. There are also some very risky structural changes. What's happening is that the governments that are clearly, if we talk about big companies being left behind, it's nothing compared to the pace in which governments are being left behind. But governments have one weapon, which is they can force companies to do things. And so suddenly we're seeing countries like France coming to Google and saying, well, you know what, guess what? We're going to tax you differently than we tax other companies. Why? Because we can. We're seeing Japan suing Amazon for shipments into Japan. Not sure if you're all aware of it, but in Amazon books, there's like $500 million lawsuit from Japan for shipping into Japan books. Because, Amazon never paid tax in Japan because the servers are outside of Japan. This is the American way of educating the world. The transaction happens where the servers are. And so suddenly governments are saying, well, I'm not willing to take that anymore. I want to get paid differently. And so these structural changes, they're the outcome of governments being left behind even more. As we said, there's no second chance. And on top of it, employee loyalty is much lower than ever before. Clearly, when we look at my grandfather, he worked ever since he came to Israel some, 80, 70 years ago, he worked in one place all his life. My father moved a few. I moved every 2 years or so, 3-4 years. And today, kids move every year and a half. In India, which is the worst right now, the average churn of employees in companies is around 55% a year. How can you invest in educating people when it's 55%? So companies like Infosys that used to basically give a university for free because people used to then stay and work for years. Now the university is paid. If you stay for 4 years, you get your money back. Because otherwise, why would they train somebody knowing that most of them will leave so quickly? And so no competitive advantage is safe today. And if you look at the pace in which companies that are in the S&P 1000 are leaving it, is the fastest pace in history. So if you look again at the beginning of the 20th century, you could take a period of 10 years and see no change in the top companies, in the top 100 companies in the world. If you look today, there's not a month without a few companies dropping in and out because of all these changes. And being slow in this accelerated world is pretty horrible. And some of these things, we spoke about Sony and the music players, and that's one way of looking at being slow. But let's look at the film companies in the digital photography world. When I was a kid, thinking that Kodak would be no longer, that was impossible. That was a household brand. That was the company that in my mind was photography. Look at them today, of course, and look at what happened along the way. How can it be that they mistook it so badly? How can it be that their entire strategy in the consumer side was based on the fact that we don't care if it's film or digital, people will just continue printing? How can it be that they did not see it coming? How can it be that the studios and the labels would not see what's happening in the internet? Let's take the music labels. So the first round, which was the MP3 round, they lost it completely. They let Apple and others take complete control of basically being the store. And I met some people in the labels, and I told them, how can that be? And they said, well, we're not unified. We do not know what to do, but it's never going to happen again. Don't worry. And guess what? The streaming era arrived, and where are they? Nowhere. The most they got is a few percentages in Spotify based on their deals. And so these companies that theoretically are, how can it be they own that they have the power? They have the artists, they have the movies, and still they don't manage to get it. MySpace, Microsoft, Google in the social world. Let's think about Microsoft for a second. Take 12 years ago, Microsoft had Live Messenger, 450 million users. They had Hotmail, around 400 million users. They had every Windows PC in the world. And they even had something, we all talk about Facebook Connect today as this great invention of Mark Zuckerberg. But Facebook Connect is a replicate of a small feature that Microsoft had in the early 2000s that was called Microsoft Passport, which was basically exactly Facebook Connect. And still, none of it connected. How come? How come the closest they ever got to social was to invest in Facebook at a valuation of $15 billion? We'll talk about that in a second. And clearly the last victims are Nokia and RIM in the smartphone space. Again, I come from the telecom world. If somebody had told me that before, actually it's not if somebody told me, the month before the iPhone went out, I sat with the CEO of Vodafone. And I asked him, what do you think about the iPhone? And he said, it's never going to succeed. CEO of Vodafone, the guy knows a thing or two about telecom. And I told him, why is that? And he said, well, very simple, because they don't understand what's important for us as the operators. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, as operators, the one thing we need the phone to always do is to allow people to talk. That's our money machine. If people can't talk, and this is a shitty phone, so we're not going to push it because we have zero interest in pushing it. And of course, in retrospect, look today, but whoever thought that Nokia and RIM would both be companies in bankruptcy or being sold for nothing? And the answer is that being slow in this world has become incredibly painful for companies. On the other hand, being fast has become a great thing. So Facebook, whatever, $100 billion in around 7 years. Airbnb, latest valuation I think is around 6 or 7 in very little time. Instagram, $1 billion before they had anything. Supercell, that's one of the games company we saw before. They just got sold for a $3.2 billion valuation. It's a company that's been around for around 3 years. Dropbox, of course, so being fast and being good get you a very long way here. The problem is that maintaining leadership is becoming tougher and tougher. And this is William Gibson, the prophet of the internet. He said, that's one of my favorite quotes. He said, the future is already here. It's just not very evenly distributed, which means that what we're seeing here, these Nokias and RIMs and Sony losing on music players, that's just the beginning. That's actually the tips of the icebergs. What's happening is a much bigger and much more frightening change that companies are missing. So what I asked myself over the years, and I almost went ahead and got my mother satisfied and went to do my PhD on that, and then decided that I have better use of my time. But I started interviewing people and CEOs in big companies, trying to understand why is innovation so difficult in big companies. Because I could see that I invest in a small startup and things move like that. I tell them something that I think should be fixed, and before I get to my office, somebody already changed it. Or, there's something that is clearly not working, and everybody stays all night long, and in the morning it's fixed. And then you sit with the CEO of a big company, and he calls everybody into the room, and he has all the power in the world, and he can fire everybody there, and he has millions of, gazillions of dollars, and thousands of developers, but it takes them 6 months to change the same thing. And I ran at that time, when I started looking at it, I ran a company that was just on the borderline. It was 1,500 people. We managed to somehow, very hard, I managed to keep, I think I managed to keep it very entrepreneurship, within the entrepreneurship spirit. And still I could see how the bigger we become, the tougher it becomes. And I started thinking, is there a solution to that? And I started interviewing people. And so it's tough today because of a few things. The first thing is that R&D costs are rising like crazy. So if you look at the cost of an engineer, anywhere around the world today is the highest in history, which means that to get more R&D today is just so expensive. On top of it, which makes it even worse, the product life cycles are much shorter. So if you take any product today, any software or hardware product, in the past, the average life cycle of a product was 2 to 3 years. If you go back 10 years, the life cycle was much longer than that. If you look today, the life cycles are, they're close to nothing. In games, they can be days because of reiteration. In other products, even in hardware, if you don't have a new product out every half a year, you're dead. Then there's the annoying phenomenon of global copycats. And global copycats, basically, we have a 3-year, everybody knows Groupon, but not many people know that Groupon, more than half of its business comes from a copycat called CityDeal, launched by a German company called Rocket Internet, the Samwer brothers. And these guys, basically, they have they call ID hunters in the valley. Whenever they stumble across a good idea, they take it and they replicate it all across Europe. And they've already replicated almost everything you can think. They replicated Zappos, they replicated Groupon, they replicated Birchbox, they replicated many more. What they eventually do in many cases, they sell it back to the parents. So at the IPO of Groupon, the founders of CityDeal had more equity than the founders of Groupon. Okay? Similarly, Birchbox is now much smaller than Glossybox. And this is Vkontakte, the Russian social network, where if you look at this on Facebook, you can see that the colors are very similar, but that's actually not the thing. If you look at the sites, they're incredibly similar. And again, it was around for many times. It is all legit because it's a different country, but still these copycats make it incredibly difficult for companies to decide to invest more in IP. And then for big companies, everyday issues overcome. And it's becoming really difficult. You've got a big company, changing anything is a nightmare. You've got existing IT systems. Everything needs to connect to everything. The minute you want to build something, there's politics. At the same time, working in the startup environment, it's never been easy. Startups that used to cost $5 million to build cost today less than $500,000 because of things like Amazon Cloud, because of off-the-shelf BI systems, because of new programming languages. And so while it's becoming tougher and tougher and tougher, companies that need to, for the big companies, that need to, first of all, work with their own systems. They can't change technologies very fast because at the end of the day, these are the people that they have, that's what they know, and they need to work in a very cumbersome manner. It's becoming incredibly difficult for the startups. Bizarrely enough, one of the things I do is that I work a lot with the Israeli, not a lot, but part of I used to be an Air Force pilot. I stopped flying, and one of the things I do today is I work with the military and some other agencies on helping them cultivate innovation inside. And bizarrely enough, this is just a side comment, the same difficulty that you see here for startups and big companies exists between the NSAs and the Mossad of the world versus the terrorists. Because again, the big guys, they have big systems, they have big processes, etc. The small guys can move very fast. And there's various things that actually kill innovation. And number one thing is getting the wrong people. And that is the big mistake of many of the bigger companies. Poorly planned incentives. So for years now, it's been very, very difficult to generate innovation. There's one thing that you all need to remember, and I'm sure you all know that. The statistics on innovation is that at the minimum, 9 out of 10 initiatives fail. Okay? Inside companies, outside companies, in general, 9 out of 10 at least fail. Now, when you're a big company, how do you build incentives that basically allow people to fail? How do you tell people, look, it's fine that you fail, although your bonus depends on success. It's fine that you fail, although your promotion, the way we do it, is based on this bell curve. And if you're not going to be here, you're not going to be the one getting the bonus, getting the equity, and getting promoted. So wrongly planned incentives kill innovation. Internal politics is a horrible thing. When I asked Microsoft, so what I did is that I chose in this research, I chose a few companies and a few topics, and I went and I tried to understand. I went and tried to meet the people. So, for example, I met the person that led the team of a digital music player in Sony. And I tried to understand how come they dropped the ball, what happened. And bizarrely enough, the story, again, I'm not sure it's 100% true, but that was his perspective, is that when they were progressing with the project, the CEO of Sony gave an interview. The Rio, you remember the first digital music player was called the Rio, and it held four songs. So, and the CEO of Sony was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, and they asked him, what does he think about that? And he said, it's never going to work, because why would consumers ever want to have to take their CDs, put them inside a PC, digitize it to MP3, connect the digital music player, upload 4 songs, And then whenever they want to listen to the next songs, they need to go through all that all over again. And now think what's happening inside the company. The CEO says something like that. What's happening to this team? Do you think they're getting properly budgeted now? No, the CEO said that's stupid. So there's no chance in the world they're going to get properly budgeted. Similarly, Microsoft at the year 2000, they had a device called the XDA. I'm not sure if you remember it, but that was basically the first connected PDA. When you look at the XDA, it's incredibly similar to what the iPhone is today. It was full touch, it was email, calendar, all integrated. Great device. Actually, I had one in the UK at the time. And when you ask Microsoft, how can it be that you dropped the ball on this? Well, apparently the unit that was called Windows Mobile moved hands 7 times inside Microsoft in a period of 10 years. Which means that the average manager of that unit served for less than a year and a half. And when it moved from being one time a standalone division, then it moved actually to the Windows division. It moved to the what was called at the time mobile devices and gaming division. 7 changes. Each time a change like this happened, the new CEO comes in. He needs to replace everybody. He brings his own people. That takes 5-6 months. Then when they come, they need to replace people to have their own people. In Microsoft, when you want to take somebody from a different place, you need to give internal notice. So that takes time. By the time they finish replacing everybody, politics hits them again, and there's a new CEO. And so, 2000, they had everything. And look where they are today with Windows Phone. So internal politics is bad. Non-agile culture, we'll talk about this in a second. 2 big teams. So there's all these research today about what's the size of a team. We'll talk about this in a second, but when you've got big teams, there's no chance to innovate. And the not invented here syndrome, meaning that, if it's not something that we've developed for years, that can't survive. How can you overcome the difficulty? So the first thing is that there's no rules. And some of the best companies in the world failed and will fail again. But there are a few principles that came from all the good companies. And great people, small teams, having the right culture, no politics, adaptive strategy, using innovation ecosystems, and quick M&A. I'll talk about all of this in a second. And you must be very agile and very focused, and you'll see why. So this is maybe the most important thing, and this is also the most important thing for startup world. And that's the right people. And I know this all sounds like cliché, but believe me, it's so true. And so little companies at the end of the day behave like that. So people are the company's main asset. I'll say it again with my broken voice. People, not technology, not patents, not distribution. People are the company's biggest asset. And you need to look for your stars. And when I used to recruit people, the headhunters used to ask me, how do we know who is the star? And I said, it's very simple. When you interview somebody, if at the end of the interview you think to yourself, even if Gigi is not going to take them for this role, I can sell them to 20 other CEOs for other roles, these are the stars. These are the people. These are the people that get the job done. And think about your teams, and you'll immediately see that they're the ones that actually they get the job done. They act on their commitments, meaning that when they promise something, it actually happens. They always do more. These are the people that volunteer to do more. It doesn't necessarily mean that they pick up their hand. It means when somebody needs to do more, they're the ones that do more. They care. And caring is something you're going to hear me say again and again and again. And when I say they care about their job, but they also care about their peers. And they care about themselves, and they care about their families. They have fire in their eyes, and they enjoy what they do. Because if they don't enjoy what they do, there's very, very little chance that they're going to be stars for a long time. One of the biggest mistakes of Israeli companies is this one. The people hire for skills, which is maybe the worst mistake you can make. So in the Israeli process of recruiting talent is that you've got a job description, and there's a very junior person that gets all the CVs, and they basically do the manual labor of saying, it said that he needs to have 4.5 years experience. No, yes. And then they end up recruiting the person or bringing to the interviews the people with the best CVs. But guess what? The best CVs don't bring the best talent into the company. Because what's the most important thing, and the one thing you can never change, is people's attitudes. And so to bring somebody who's great on skills and bad on attitude is a poison pill inside the company. If you bring somebody who's got the right attitude, And they're not perfect on the skills. Now, clearly, don't take your cleaner and turn them into your head of architecture or something. But other than these extremes, bring somebody who's good on skills, good on attitude, and okay on skills. The person's going to deliver a lot more over time. You need to build a team rather than just a group of individuals. And many times we Israelis, we recruit, here's one guy and another guy. All three of them are alpha dogs. All of them are, they're great leaders. Can they work together? Do they complement each other? Is it a team that's worth more than the sums of its parts? So think about how they work together. And there's another thing that we're very, very bad at in Israel. Don't be afraid to recruit different people. I get it, I have an emotional feeling when I get one team after another that are all of them 8 to 200 graduates. All of them went to the same unit exactly. They did exactly the same thing in the army. They went through exactly the same classes. And they come to me and they say, we're a team. And I look at them and say, well, you're not a team. You're 3 clones of the same person. And they say, yeah, but we're a team. I say, okay, so who's the CEO? One of them says, I am. And why are you the CEO? Because that's what we decided. And who's the CTO? I'm the CTO. Why? Because that's what we decided. So, different people that are not by the mold, people that are not more of the same, they're the ones that are going to bring you the most value. And you shouldn't be afraid to recruit them because they're the ones that are going to bring the most value, they're going to be the most loyal, and they're going to bring the out-of-the-box solutions. Once you bring great people, make sure you keep them. And keeping them is as hard as bringing them because you need to care about them. And caring is, it's a big word, but you really need to care about them. If you care about your people, everything is easy. You need to empower them. You don't bring these stars and then micromanage them because they don't want to be micromanaged. They want to be empowered. You want to get positive feedback. Even the best of people need to get positive feedback and great compensation, remuneration when they're good. You can't work just on love. Over time, if they're good, it needs to be felt. You need to listen to them because when you bring great people, they want to be heard. They want to feel that they're making an impact. Don't let them burn out. That was one of my biggest mistakes. In interviews, I always said, what's your downside? I'm a workaholic. But seriously, I used to be a workaholic. And I used to demand the same thing for people. And I think one of the worst things that I ever did is that many of the great people that worked for me in the past, before I understood that, I let them burn out. I let them work too much. And then these people, you let them work more, they work more. You give them more tasks, they do them. But eventually, after a year, they're all broken, they're worn out, they can't continue working like that. And at the end of the day, you find out that you lose your stars, and it's not good for any of you, so don't let them burn out. I'm sure everybody knows the strategy. This is really a critical thing. This comes all the way from a research I read about the Industrial Revolution. And what they did is that they took people that their job in the factory was to do that. And they took 2 groups. One group just didn't know why they were doing this. They just knew that this is what they had to do. The other group they took, and they showed them how the little round thing that they were making, they took them along the assembly line and they showed them how that round thing basically holds the wheel in the car at the end of the day. And the people that knew what it was good for, they basically produced more than 50% over time, more than those that for which it was just pulling a lever job. And so the same thing applies for everybody that works for you or for yourself. If you don't know why what you're doing is important for the company, if you don't know why it's actually part of the strategy, it's very difficult to wake up in the morning and a lot of energy. So this is something that you need to ensure. You need to make decisions. I know that making decisions sounds contradictory to empowering, but as a CEO, again, as a young CEO, I used to make this mistake all the time. People came to me and said, we need you to decide between this and that. And then, Israeli CEO out of the Air Force, I used to say, you know what, guys, I didn't bring you guys so that I can make decisions. You're grown-ups, you go and decide. But the reality is that by the time they decided that they want help, the reason is because there's no clear decision. Because if one if it goes with this way, then the other department suffers or the other way, and they really want. So if they come to you for decisions, make them, and critically celebrate success. Everybody wants to be part of a successful team, and if you don't celebrate success, eventually people are going to want to go away. You need to keep the innovation team small. Large team, there's slow innovation. The reason there's slow innovation is because more time goes for coordination and bureaucracy. And there's no sense of accountability and no sense of ownership. I've spoken to Google and eBay and Amazon and Facebook And the number that comes up again and again and again is that a team larger than 25% is a team that can't innovate. And so keep your innovation team small. The perfect size is 10 to 15 people. That's the, it doesn't mean that it needs to be your entire company. But if you want to innovate in some area, take a group, let them work. And if you can give them the signs of a special unit and making them feel that they're special, working on something, that even helps even more. Develop the right culture. And so culture clearly is a critical success factor. And the things, and we're not going to dive into these, but full innovation, open-mindedness, a culture of listening, excellence, caring, as I said before, and admitting and accepting mistakes. Caring, as I said, is the one thing that I feel from my experience is the one thing that resonates again and again and again. When you care about your business, when you care about the people, when there's a culture of caring about things, the rest follows. No politics, as we said before, that's a killer for anything in the company. And the bigger the company, the tougher it is to prevent politics. But this is really a critical thing. And CEOs, you really need, when you see politics, you really need to act really, really fast. One of the things I took from one of the CEOs I worked for in the past, he used to basically act very aggressively at any signs of negative politics. And so whenever you see something, just make sure that it doesn't survive. And then setting an adaptive strategy, which is really difficult because all of us were, we were educated to a certain type of strategy. And this strategy doesn't work anymore. So wait and see doesn't exist anymore. And when I went to Kellogg, I actually looked at the book, and that's not that many years ago. And it had a strategy that said, reserve the right to play, which meant we're big, we can wait, we'll move fast. And Nokia thought that, and Kodak thought that, and Microsoft thought that. And the reality is that reserve the right to play means do now. If you want to succeed today, you can't wait. When you see something happening, you need to move really fast. And you need to move really fast on opportunities. And always strive to be number one, because in today's market, almost in every field, being number 2 or below doesn't count that much. And the outcome of all of this is that you really need to choose your battles really wisely, because you can't be everywhere. So you really need to strategize and decide what are the domains where you really must be number one. And over there, just act, and move really fast, and don't let anybody run faster than you. And then the last element of this is what's called the fail fast element, which means once you find out that something is not working, the flip side of the coin of being able to move fast and being able to really act now on everything is that when you find out that something's not working, kill it very fast. One of the best examples for me of why Facebook is a great company is a small example of a product that was called Facebook Check-ins. And Facebook Check-ins was basically a replica of Foursquare. And that was a project that had around 90 people working for 4 or 5 months. So that's a few $1 million, and that's a big focus area for the company. They launched it, and they took it off in 8 days. They didn't take it off to fix it. They didn't take it off to optimize it. They killed the project. Why? Because they put it out, and what they found out very quickly is that their users didn't want that. That was not the kind of solution that the users wanted from Facebook. And so they took some of the elements out of it, and they took geolocation to where it is today, which every post you put basically has a geolocation element to it. But the vocal decision to be able to say, so I spent $10 million, but this is not the right solution. And I can see that doesn't matter how much I'm going to tweak it, it's not going to be the home run I want. So I'm going to step back, I'm going to take the tough decision, I'm going to start running again in a different direction. That makes it a great company today in the tech world. And then one of the tricks that some of these companies use is what's called innovation ecosystems. It's a way to act when you understand that there's more smart people outside than you'll ever have inside your company. And you want to leverage other companies or other people's innovation. And so what you do, you create a business model where basically other people can bring their innovation and everybody profits from it. So clearly everybody knows the App Store or the Facebook App Store or the Force App Store, which is basically an innovation ecosystem. So when Apple started with iPhone, Apple didn't think about that at the beginning. The only reason they moved there is because of the hacked versions that had these app stores without Apple support. But they code out really fast. And basically what they're managing to do, think how many of the apps that we have today and enjoy could have actually been built by Apple, or built by Apple and partners, but by Apple commissioning them. The answer is close to nothing. On the other hand, when you open it to the world, we got there are 5 million apps today, and it's just growing like crazy, and everybody can get exactly what they want. And so these innovation ecosystems are a way to basically shortcut the route to innovation. And the last thing is quick M&A. People don't really see how material that is as a strategy. But the principle is very simple. Because you can't wait and see, because you can't fight all battles, and because others will get to things quicker than you do, in many cases, in these areas where you think you must be the leader, don't wait. And buy as quickly as you can. Buy talent. Move very quickly. So Google last year, if I recall correctly, the number is 82 acquisitions. Of these 82 acquisitions, around 75 are talent acquisitions, meaning company with no revenue, hardly a product, and just a bunch of founders. In their world, the intention is not for each one of these to be successful. Their strategy talks about 9 out of 10 failing. But that 1 out of 10, saving them a multi-billion-dollar business that they would have missed. And the reason is, again, very simple, because even for Google, being maybe the company that, the biggest company that still manages to keep some of that innovative culture, even for them, to set up a new team where they need to select a manager, put him on the project, recruit engineers, get some budgets, get it approved, get some initial product specs and start running. Even for Google, it's 6 to 9 months to do that. And if there's somebody out there and they're already doing it, and in 6 to 9 months, they may become the next Dropbox or the next Airbnb. So let's buy them now. Everybody's happy. They got investment at a $5 million valuation. We throw 20. The investors make 4 times in half a year. They wouldn't mind that much. The founders, they get a lot of equity. So they don't mind that much because they don't only make some exit, but they also get some upside in the future. And they do 0 PMI. They don't touch them. They let them continue running. Knowing that like this, they basically solve part of the innovation dilemma for themselves. So, how does all that tie into the way I choose companies? So the first thing, no, it's not luck. Although I think that, clearly some entrepreneurs that get to me think that I just throw a dice, but I try to have a system. And the first thing is team. And I've explained all of that, so I'll not repeat this. But I'm very proud to say that over the years I invested in some 65 companies. There's only one founding team that I'm not very good friends with today. And this is for me, it's maybe the most important thing, because it means that I made very little mistakes on the people. But all of them are good investments. I made very little mistakes on the people. And what I always tell founders is that the way I choose is not just by how innovative and how great they are and how fun they are, but I want to have people that, even if we fail, failing together is going to be fun. And this is, it's a big thing. I look for people that are very agile and can adapt really quickly, because all of my biggest, most successful companies that are, worth more than $1 billion today, none of them ended up where they started. Why? Because the world is changing. And, the route to success takes around 7 years. And in these 7 years, things change, the world changes. And so it might have started here and they're going to end elsewhere. So they need to be very agile, they need to be capable of changing. They shouldn't be afraid of failing, but at the same time, they must be sure that they're going to succeed. So you don't want somebody that thinks they're not going to succeed, but on the other hand, you can't have somebody that just is paralyzed by failure. They have to possess the right culture and know their field really well. I'm looking for domains where having no assets, meaning having no liabilities, which is an advantage. So, for example, the biggest example is, for example, SaaS software. If you go and look at somebody that takes a piece of software and says, this was done in the past using software that you install on-premise, and now we're going to build this as something that happens in the cloud, then for the existing company to move their product from an installed product, from a locally installed product to the cloud, it's actually tougher usually than building it from scratch. And so I'm looking for these areas where by basically having no baggage, it's an advantage. I'm looking for areas where the big companies will be slow or afraid to hurt their current models. So this is really important. There are many areas where I invested in where when you look at the big companies, you know that they could have moved quicker. They could have done things. But literally you're seeing that for them to move quickly basically means to risk their business. And if I go back to the examples of big companies, I got to the board of Blockbuster, and I tried to understand how come they lost to Netflix. Because Blockbuster had its own household name, everybody knew them, they had all the rights agreements, they had everything. And still they managed to lose to Netflix. And I got to somebody that sat on their board and I said, I really need to understand. Did you really think that people will prefer to continue getting into the car, driving to the shopping mall, getting into your store, going to the shelves, seeing that the new hot movies are not there, going to the student with the pimples at the counter, trying to bribe him to give him the movies that he's keeping for his friends out at the counter, taking the movie, going home, being late, returning it. They would really prefer all of that to sitting at home and streaming it directly to their TVs. I mean, what were you thinking? And he said, well, you don't understand. We had a total plan for that. Everything was ready. But in our calculations, launching this would have killed our core business. And so we waited. We thought we were going to get it just in time. And we all know what happened. So I'm looking for the areas where I think the big guys are going to be slow because they're going to be afraid to lose their current business. And so the young, quick guys move quickly. Things I do, I stress test the team, which means that those of you that are entrepreneurs, and there are a few here that tried to raise money for me, would know that I ask many questions. I ask for lots of, not analysis because I want analysis, but because I want to see how the team handles the stress of the question, handles the analysis that I'm looking for, and how they take what they have and present it. I ask smarter people than me. So I have a network of people that I ask. So for example, if I get an e-commerce startup and I'm not sure about it, then I will talk to somebody in Amazon and somebody in eBay and somebody in other companies to make sure that I get smarter people and leverage my network. I always check references about people because at the end of the day, if I want to know the culture, the real culture and real characteristics of people that know them from before, know everything, and try to learn what the team members did and achieved before, because I invest in the people. And so understanding who they are and what they did before, even if it's high school, even if it's the army, that means a lot to me. I see how the team handles advice, because what I look for in entrepreneurs is it's very, very subtle. I'm looking for people that are, on one hand, I want them to be the leaders that don't wait for anybody and they run. But on the other hand, I want them to be able to take smart advice from smart people. So if I can give them smart advice, which is sometimes the case, I see how they handle my advice. And if I can't, I get them to meet people that can give them advice and see how they handle the advice. Because that's a great predictor to their ability to improve over the years. And I always play a lot with the product. Because there's nothing more important than actually feeling the product in your hands and seeing that it's good. What I don't do, I don't send them to any exams. I don't believe in psychological exams or anything of the kind. I never try to calculate the market size or the total available market or something like that, because that usually means very little. I never reject somebody just because there's competition. One of my best companies in history, which is a company called Canshu, when I wanted to invest in it, there was only one competitor. It was called DoubleClick. It was already a $1 billion company, and it was just acquired by Google. So when I asked people, should I invest? Everybody said, of course no, because there's this huge competition. Then I asked the guy that was the CEO of DoubleClick, David, and he told me, that's a waste of money, don't invest there. And luckily I did not listen to him. So the fact that there is competition, if I like the team, that doesn't mean anything, because they're going to find a way. It may not be exactly the same product that they wanted to do. It may be something else, but I invest in the team, so I don't care. I don't expect founders to have all the answers. I don't watch the day, and I never let others screen companies for me. I've tried that before, but as I want people that are different, as I want companies that are not trivial, and as I know that smart people would probably have said no to most of the good companies I invested in, I just don't let anybody else decide. I decide for myself. What I don't do is, and these three are kind of tricky because I'm very proud to say that I don't do them. But the reason I know to say that I don't do them is because I did it in the past, and I figured that doesn't work. I don't invest because other smart people just invested in the company. My worst example is that I invested in a company that today it's already a rest in peace. That was a mobile site building technology. And the guy that invested with me in the same round, there were two people. One of them was there was a company in Israel called Logia. Those of you might remember it. It was at the time, it was the people that knew the most about mobile sites in the world. And the other guy was Zev Bregman, a good friend of mine who was the CEO of Converse. He also knows a thing or two about mobile. And we invested in the company. The company went down. And I was very busy at the time, and I didn't really do diligence or anything. And then at the final board meeting, I came and Zevi came to me and said, "You son of a bitch." And I said, "Why?" He said, "I invested because of you." And I said, "What do you mean I invested because of you?" And he said, "No, I never had time to even look at them. But they told me that you were investing." I said, "Okay." So I did that mistake and I learned not to do it again. I never invest because the founders are my friends. And I never invest because it looks like a great bargain, because the good companies don't necessarily look like great bargains. Many times it's the other way around. And if all of this sounds confusing, then remember that you shouldn't worry, because whatever seems certain today will definitely change. This is 1999. Microsoft looks like a monopoly. Look at them today. 2000. AOL Time Warner, anybody remembers that? That was the new monopoly to conquer the world. That was miserable. 2007 Google, maybe that one is still relevant, but when I quoted this one, it was when Facebook was everything that everybody wanted. And so the world is changing so fast, and big companies are disappearing so fast, and new companies are emerging so fast that you should worry, because also great companies is changing. So Zynga, Groupon, just 2-3 years ago, they were the new kids on the block. Everybody loved them. Look where they are today. So changes are so fast that, be glad, because it's the best time to be in the tech world ever. Stay open-minded. Accept that it's an accelerated world and you need to move different than you moved before. Ensure that whatever you do, investing or managing or being part of a team, ensure that you've got the right people, the right culture, and the right strategy. Invest in startups, of course, and as I like saying, ride the waves of change. It's a great period, and I'm enjoying it. I'm sure you will as well.
Time for questions. 10 to 15 minute presentation, Maureen Shelley, about the iAngels platform and how this connects to Gigi's investment strategy.
Okay, so thank you Gigi for a very inspiring talk, and Oren for your kind words, and Avenue for hosting us. Allow me to introduce ourselves. I'm Maurasia, this is Shelley Hod. We're founding partners of iAngels. Short background. I personally grew around technology in Israel. My father was a member of the management team at Amdocs for many years, so that was kind of my upbringing. I joined the military, working for 8200 intelligence unit, working as an...
You don't look like most of them.
Working as an intelligence analyst on technologies. I pursued my bachelor's degree at the Technion in mathematics and computer science. So the Technion is Israel's Institute of Technology, home to some of the brightest minds, Nobel Prize winners, and technologies emerging from Israel. So like everyone around me was always working on technologies, many entrepreneurs, working on new startups. So it's not very surprising that I ended up marrying an entrepreneur. Yoni Asya is my husband. Some of you may know him. He's founder and CEO of eToro, which is the world's largest social investment network. And eToro is kind of a company that I saw from inception, from like two guys in the garage, to the $250 million company it is today. But me, I was always a corporate girl. I had different technological, business, strategy roles, working for SAP in Israel, working for IBM strategy here in Manhattan, and in Israel for Amdocs corporate strategy. However, I always knew that at some point I'm gonna cross over to entrepreneurship and definitely become a lot more involved.
My name is Shelly Hutt. My journey was a little different. I actually started out more like a downtown girl. I studied philosophy, wine, yoga. My father used to tell me I should consider studying something I can actually make a living out of. And at one point I took my first course in accounting and discovered my inner geek. There was no way back. Since college I had the great privilege of working in different positions on Wall Street, first at UBS as a financial advisor, managing other people's investment portfolios. Then during the subprime crisis, I worked here at Avenue Capital, which were kind enough to host us. I was a research analyst investing in distressed financial companies you might know, like Citigroup and AIG. Then moved on to Goldman Sachs as an investment banker. One of the advantages of working at Goldman Sachs for 3 years and 20 hours a day is that you actually get to see a lot of companies in different stages. So from the early fundraising stages to growth to liquidation and IPOs, I got a broad taste of the finance world. Maura and I met 6 years ago. When she was doing her MBA at Columbia, we hit it off immediately and became great friends. One thing Maura and I have in common is that I also married an entrepreneur. My husband, Kfir Moyal, is one of the founders of Matomi, which is supposed to IPO later on this year. He's also the general partner of Sci-Hawk Ventures, which is an early stage micro VC, investing primarily in ad tech and internet. And I think that through Kfir, I really learned a lot about the early stage high-tech ecosystem and how interesting it can be for investors.
One of the talks that Shelly and I always used to have was, we really know a lot of entrepreneurs, really know a lot of high-tech companies, really hear about deals as they happen. I think you even tried to calculate once what it would have meant for us to really be involved in some of these companies early on, like Matomi and eToro and Visabo and Wix and so many companies that we know from home. And I think we might have been somewhere else right now, had we. But so we obviously as young business professionals really can't invest and be involved in so many in these companies. We just don't have the capital. But so many people around the world have the capital, don't have the access. Why not marry the two? And that's how iAngels was born. So let me tell you a little bit about how early stage investing happens in Israel today. So the great opportunities, they close fast, and they closed among an exclusive group of angel investors. Many of them don't see the light of day. And we're going to be the first ones to open up this ecosystem to non-insiders. iAngels is bringing individual investors from all over the world access to top angel investments deals in Israel. So we've all heard about Startup Nation, and the past couple of years have been truly exceptional, and we're going to share with you a couple of facts. In 2013, there were 80 exits with an aggregate value of $7 billion. Now, this might surprise some of you, but only 43% of these companies were backed by VCs, while the majority of them were backed by angels. Now, there are a couple of dynamics that are happening right now in Israel that are contributing to this positive momentum. One thing that's happening is that a lot of the entrepreneurs have matured. They have several years of experience. They worked in multiple startups. In fact, a lot of the people who sold their companies, even here in 2013, are already working on their next big company. And history shows that second and third time entrepreneurs have a much higher likelihood of success. Another thing that's happening is that a lot of the large global companies have already made a lot of acquisitions in Israel, or at least several. Now, today there are over 240 companies, global companies, with R&D centers in Israel, employing over 50,000 people. Now, needless to say, it's much easier to acquire a company if you've already done so in the past. You got comfortable with Israel, you've been successful, and you're in proximity close to the startups. So we believe that these dynamics are going to continue. 2014 is expected to be an incredible year with a great pipeline of IPOs. Some people expect it to set a new record of exits.
So there's a lot of opportunity out there, and iAngels is definitely positioned to be part of it.
So our key entry point to this exciting market is our network of angel investors. Our top angel investors, they see the entire market. And when a startup starts up, one of the first people they want to call is Gigi Levy. And the reason I know this is because I called Gigi Levy the moment we founded iAngels. And if you don't believe me, you can ask any entrepreneur in Israel. And why do people want these top angels on their team? Well, they have a reputation of being incredible mentors. They have a huge amount of experience working in global companies in top executive positions. So they have transactional experience, they have operational experience, they have global connections, they have history of track record, exits to their names, and they really are personally committed to the success of the company. So they're investing out of their own pocket, their own funds, and time to really see these companies grow. And this is very important for us because as the angels take care of their own interest, by extension, they take care of ours. And through our personal relationship with these top angels, that iAngels is able to really leverage their position. How connected are we? This is just a funny story. Just the other day, we had back-to-back meetings with maybe 4 of our angel investors, and the name of this company that they're excited about, constantly came up in conversation. So by the end of the day, we already had an intro to the company. We're now evaluating the opportunity.
So how exactly does it work? We have a 3-step screening process, which begins with the angels. The first step is an angel decides to invest in a company, has already done the due diligence. They came up with a solid term sheet. That's where we come in. We meet with the company. We talk with references and with other angels that met the company. After we get excited about a company, decide we want to invest, we bring it to our advisory board, which is comprised of our investors and our advisors. And at that point, when all the stars align, we'll open up this opportunity to our community of investors. Our investors can go online, learn about the companies, join webinars, and choose to invest on a deal-by-deal basis. Currently, our minimum investment ticket per opportunity is $5,000. This is really to allow people to get comfortable in an area they didn't necessarily have before, start small, maybe grow big in the future. In the past couple of months, we started working just a couple of months ago, and we noticed that the average ticket size is about $30,000. After we reach the target amount raised, then we sign the definitive agreements that were negotiated by the angels. So again, we're able to take advantage of the angels' negotiating power as well as the added value throughout the lifetime of the investment. And now because we're aggregating all the small investments, we're actually coming in as a pretty big shareholder. And we receive all the rights that any other major shareholder receives. These include information rights, they include future participation rights, which basically allow us to continue and maintain our position throughout the lifetime of the investment. On the back end, iAngels takes care of all the legal setup, accounting, fees, and the vision is really to allow people to invest in a very simple way with minimal effort. So who can join us? First of all, people who are obviously excited about investing in Israel, investing in Israeli startups, see the opportunity and also the risks that are involved. We're looking for people who are able to and want to build a portfolio of startups. And because we're working under the Private Placement Act, then you also need to be an accredited investor. So if you answer all these criteria, we welcome you. Our vision is really to provide a fair, transparent, and responsible way to invest in startups alongside leading angels.
So we have already a few very interesting opportunities up on our website. As Shelly said, we started off a few months ago. Over the past 3 months, we raised over $1 million. We closed 3 rounds of finance with 3 companies, Brand Shield, Vistory, Flavor. Some of you may know them. We have some companies that we're very excited about, with open rounds of finance. One of them is 24andMe, a virtual personal assistant and productivity app. The other is Space Pharma, which is commercializing R&D experiments in space for pharmaceutical companies, kind of like your taxi into space. And the third is 7-Element Studio, a strategy gaming platform. So as you can see, we're really active across different verticals. We have a very nice blend and companies we're currently promoting. We have over $200,000 committed to some of these open deals online. And I like to finalize and say, Seneca said, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. We don't think there's anything random about luck, just as Gigi said. So iAngels have an abundance of opportunities at our fingertips. We're very well prepared for them, and together we can all make our own luck. Thank you.
We have 20 more minutes. Feel free to get up and grab some food and beverages, and we'll start a Q&A. Gigi, you're going to be joining us. How's your sound doing? How's your voice? Questions? Anybody had a question they want to ask? About the platform, about Gigi, about his strategy? How do you want to respond
I see him walking up and down
No, Marco ist
Hey.